Hi, everybody, and welcome along to Reimagining Healthcare live stream. Today, I'm going to be bringing on Kennedy Lay, who is a physiotherapist and founder and director of the Communication Experience and the Health Experience, and is putting together a online event that's coming up on the 22nd of May called Breakthrough 2020. So without further ado, let's get Kennedy into the mix. Hey, Kennedy, how are you doing today?
Hi, Yanni. Good. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks, mate. Well, look, rather than me kind of introducing you any further, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, mate?
Yeah. First of all, thanks, Yanni, for having me on. This is, I think, one of the first times that I'm involved with a live streaming event. I kind of feel like Carl Stefanovic on, what's he on, Channel 9?
I have no idea, mate. Trying to avoid the mainstream TV.
So thanks for the introduction, Yanni. I'm a physio by trade, and I also run a side business called the Communication Experience. And it started off as being helping new graduates in healthcare, so specifically physio, to transition from the university experience to the full-time working experience. And as we all know, in healthcare, communication skills and soft skills are, I would argue, just as important as clinical skills. So that's how it started. And yes, just like Yanni said before, I'm in the process of organizing a conference, an online virtual conference. Actually, the second installment of the Breakthrough series. Last year was physical. And because, I suppose, unfortunate or opportunistic time that COVID presents to us now, we've pivoted to an online conference. So a little bit about me, a bit of an entrepreneur at heart, but clinical physio by trade.
Yeah, most definitely. And look, we'll get to Breakthrough 2020 because I think it's a really great event, which is why I'm a big supporter and want to be part of that as well. But I want to know a little bit more about you, Kennedy. Tell us a little bit more because, you know, what struck me when I was getting to know you is your passion for the profession, and secondly, your own personal observations of what it's been like for you moving through your student phase and then going into the profession, and kind of the observations that you made on what it was like for you and your peer group actually coming through the experience and how that kind of inspired you around the communication experience. You want to give us a little bit about the backstory, your university life going into the profession, and kind of give us that background again?
Absolutely. So I graduated from La Trobe Physio School 3 years ago, and it was, I think, just as I'm not going to take a stab on any of the university systems, but I think generally in healthcare, the transition between university life to especially private practice physio is absolutely huge. And when I went straight from university to private practice physio, practicing in a clinic, I got hit like a truck because all university equipped me with was hospital-based knowledge, and it was all clinical skills. It was about, here's a knee, how do you treat this knee? But it actually doesn't talk about other aspects that probably equal or more important than clinical skills, such as your communication skills to your patients, or how to get your patient to adhere to your exercises, or even just developing trust and rapport. And I think university, I'm not saying university does that really poor. I understand that there's only 4 years in that program, but I think there's a bit more that could be given to current university students to help them better prepare for private practice physio. And I suppose that's where my journey came from, was when I came out from university, I was like, yep, I know most things. I can confidently treat a patient. But when you actually put a patient in front of you, it's a completely different story. Does that kind of
no, that's great. And you were telling me as well that the type of things that you were observing is that the pathway into practice wasn't necessarily always supported as somebody who's transitioning from being in the student phase and then moving into the profession phase. Tell me a little bit more about that side of it.
Yeah, I think in the healthcare industry, yes, we are somewhat supported, but I like to draw a comparison to, for example, the aviation industry. Let's say a group like Virgin or Qantas, they would have a cadetship program where you train for a period amount of time between one year to a year and a half, and then you'll get all the ground theory knowledge, you'll get all the flying experience as comparable to your university degree, and then you would become a second officer or a first officer sitting on the right hand side or sitting in the back controlling the plane. You won't, obviously you're not, the captain actually makes those critical decisions. But in healthcare, you know all these clinical knowledge, you know all these theories, and suddenly you're put in the captain seat and you're supposed to make all these decisions. And of course, it's not life and death, but you are solely responsible for all the decisions, all the education and advice around the patient's life that you have to make. I think the healthcare industry is lacking the, whether you want to call it a cadetship or a placement type. Universities already do placements, but a bit more handheld, guided, exploratory, progressive program would be quite nice. That's what I like to see. So I don't know if I don't know if drawing comparison to the aviation industry makes sense to you. What do you think? Is that a fair?
It works for me, mate. It works for me because I love metaphors and kind of abstracts to help me understand things. And I'm not a physio, so I haven't gone through the journey and experienced it that way. But I know that's been very strong in your own motivation, where you've thought about and empathised with what that experience was like, and that's kind of given you those insights in terms of how you're mentoring students and young professionals in the physio space at the moment as well. So I thought it's great for you to. It's a good opportunity for you to get that out and actually talk about that, because I'm not really aware of too many people that focus on that stage in the profession. And I would imagine that if it's not a great experience for a young aspiring health professional, that they might be more prone to exiting the industry, sooner rather than later. What's been your experience in that regard?
Yeah, the industry average for us as a physio is, like you said, we are quite prone to leaving the industry early. I think the industry average is around 5 to 7 years, which is not a lot considering how much study and how hard it is to get in from both a undergraduate or a postgraduate qualification entry requirement point of view. And I suppose to your question is, I think consolidating those skills early, so things like soft skills, communication, building trust and rapport with your patients, give you another skill set to be able to treat those patients and deliver better outcomes quicker and more efficiently. And whether or not that contributes to career, I don't think it necessarily directly contributes to career longevity, but I think it definitely helps bring a different side to the treatment outcome in terms of delivering better treatment outcomes. And then hence, if you're delivering better treatment outcomes, then you're getting your patients back, and in turn you're getting a higher job satisfaction. And I think job satisfaction is a huge component to being in or staying loyal or staying in your profession for an extended period of time. While we're on that, Yanni, if I could just explore a bit more perhaps about why the physio profession has such a short lifespan. Do you mind?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think the number one key factor in influencing a short career lifespan for a physio is it doesn't have a lot of wiggle room. So I'm going to draw a comparison to a medical student. So a medical student goes through a couple of years at intern years, and then a registrar years, anywhere between 3 to 5 years at a hospital. and then they can either specialize. So you've gone from intern to a registrar, and then there's different options. You can go be a GP, you can go be a specialist, you can retrain to be a surgeon. There's different multiple career pathways in the medicine field. With physio, you can, from university, you have to decide whether you go into hospital or private practice. And if you go into hospital, you are a physio in the hospital. You can be a senior physio, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, but ultimately you're still a physio. And same thing as private practice. When you're in a private practice, you're a clinician, and then you become a senior clinician, and then you're still a clinician. At the end of the day, you still have to treat patients to bring revenue in. And there's just a lack of career variation, and there's a lack of career progression as well. And hence there's a I suppose, bit of a ceiling effect with salary with physios. I think that's one of the most main contributing factors to that.
So that it was one of the things that really struck me with learning more about what you're doing is you kind of, you are talking about the things that don't necessarily get taught at university, and it's kind of complementing the academic skills and the capabilities that are taught with kind of those professional development skills that are in and around the clinical, side of things. So let's kind of move it into a more kind of contemporary phase that the whole healthcare sector is in at the moment. How prepared were you 3, 4, 5 years ago during your student phase for concepts around digital health, of which a part of it right now is telehealth, as an example? Was that being supported at that time, or
No.
are you and your peers now confronted with a situation where everybody's kind of in the deep end when it comes to telehealth?
Yeah. I think physio has always, as a profession, physio has always been taught, has always been delivered, has always been perceived as a physical contact profession. And yes, and absolutely, it is a physical. It is a physical. People perceive physio as a physical profession, and it is a physical profession. But I think during this time of COVID-19, it really changes the way we think about physio and think about how we deliver telehealth. At university, go back to your question first, Yanni. At university, there was absolutely 0% of what was considered any remote health, telehealth, e-health, whatever you want to call it. Just because I think we as humans, most of us are very reactive, and none of us really saw this coming and hitting our industry as hard as it has, or it is, and we are forced to pivot to telehealth. And I think it's a really opportunistic time for a lot of clinicians because it offers a lot of flexibility. You can work from home. You can, your patients have you on their fingertips, and you have your patients on their fingertips. And I think coming out of COVID-19, telehealth is going to remain a strong competitor in the industry, as opposed to, competes with face-to-face, whether that's within a business that has multiple services that's been offered, or, you're going to see a increase in purely online physio delivered service. But I think after this is over, there's going to be a mix and balance of in-person and telehealth consults, which is really exciting. And Yanni, I suppose throw the ball back into your court. You're seeing a lot more activity on Core Plus, and with the recent new launch with that telehealth software, it's really exciting for you guys as well.
Yeah, it really is, and I'm just in awe of everybody within our client community who have been able to pivot in some way. There's a lot of choices, and that's kind of an interesting challenge out there. I mean, you can do video in so many different ways. We're seeing a significant minority of our customers that are taking up the telehealth within the Core Plus platform at this point in time, but it's growing every day. we've had in excess just this month, we've had in excess of 120,000 minutes worth of telehealth consultations. But that makes me then see, for example, how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of minutes are being done on Zoom, on Skype, on FaceTime, on different types of products that have already been selected broadly. And that's kind of, that's going to be an interesting challenge for digital health going forward, because those systems are not integrated. They're isolated systems. They don't have the clinical functionality that needs to be tied in seamlessly with the rest of the healthcare practice. So that's going to be an interesting challenge, I think, for all of healthcare going forward, where as when we take our professional hats off and we're just ourselves, living at home, we work with tools every day that in our social media, the way that we actually communicate, chat, and do video with our family and friends. And that's so universal and so pervasive that it just seems like a natural thing to reach for when it comes to doing video in a professional environment within healthcare. But I personally, and I talk a lot about this in the industry, I think we have to kind of educate the industry more around some of those clinical risks, some of the privacy risks, and some of the clunkiness that comes about from using systems that are not integrated seamlessly. What's your thought on it as a physiotherapist? Is it really just, all right, Yanni, we'll get there, but right now we just want to sort of figure out video, or do you think there's just a lack of education at this point in time in terms of what is telehealth versus what is video?
Yeah, I think there's a huge. I think definitely the lack of knowledge or the lack of understanding towards privacy acts within Australia and even the world internationally is a huge factor, because prior to speaking to, including yourself, Yanni, a couple of professionals in the industry, I know a lot of people have been using Zoom, and I previously, formally, I don't know if it was or wasn't legally. What's the right word? It's not legally compliant, because. And there's a couple of reports that that's been lingering on social media on how there's different hackers that can hack into Zoom, and people can just enter your meeting just randomly out of nowhere. And I think that's a really concerning factor for especially. Not especially, but towards a physio. And I can understand, it's the same as other professions like psychology. You wouldn't want someone to listen in your own confidential conversation with your psychologist. More for physio, let's pivot to the physio aspect. When I do telehealth, I have patients stripping off and showing their range of motion, for example, with their belly. And imagine if that patient was a higher profile patient, that information or that picture or that video got leaked out and it was used against them in some way or the other. I'm speaking, I suppose, very cybersecurity focused, but I think a lot of people don't know the risks involved with using just a simple video conferencing program like Zoom or Google Hangouts. Until they know. So, and I think Core Plus really delivers that confidentiality and that privacy compliant act that I think we all need. But back to your question, Yanni, it's definitely about education to health professionals about no, Zoom is not okay.
Well, I think in the US it is, especially not the free version, but definitely the premium healthcare version of it in the US, as long as it's connected to US systems that are also integrated with the same standard around privacy and healthcare information. So that makes a lot of sense. But, this is the challenge for us in Australia, is that we have our own standards here.
Yeah.
And again, this is something that I talk about around the industry. We hear a lot about HIPAA compliance, for example, HIPAA, and that is a standard for the exchange of healthcare information between electronic systems in the United States, and so that's the standard you've got to meet if you're a US health provider. Now that we're sort of global and technology platforms can be accessed and subscribed to anywhere in the world, there's kind of this misinformation that happens with Australian healthcare providers where we see some marketing that says HIPAA compliance and we think it's great, tick. We've met some kind of, healthcare information criteria. But it's a big problem for Australia in the sense that HIPAA doesn't matter to Australian healthcare information. The standards we have here are different. They're referred to as HL7, they're referred to as FHIR and CDA, and that they all are linked back to standards that are built into the My Health record, as well as secure messaging communication standards for different clinical systems in terms of how they share information. So those are the standards that really need to get more airtime in terms of compliance for the exchange of healthcare information. And there's some really good stuff on the Australian Digital Healthcare Agency's website around that for health practitioners. And I think the peak bodies are slowly catching up, with that as well. And the other thing I'd sort of add to it as well is that even if you have, one system that meets that standard and has that compliance, it's also the systems that integrate with it. That actually interoperate with it, that need to have that end-to-end compliance as well. Otherwise, you've got one piece of software that's compliant, but the issue around HL7 and FHIR and CDA and any kind of healthcare standard is the exchange of healthcare information between different electronic systems. And so when we think about video, as an example, this is why products like Skype and Hangouts and Zoom and FaceTime and WhatsApp and what have you, they're not really going to fit the purpose in the long run because they're secure. There's no problem with security, I think, generally. IT is secure, but they're isolated and they don't conform to that healthcare communication standard. So I think that's an important part. And I think it's going to be, I'm kind of observing what's happening. I think in mental health, it's a lot easier to meet that standard. But with the physical therapies, it's going to be interesting how that kind of evolves. Anyway, why don't we sort of move on to you provide some telehealth services, right? So, any guidance that you might offer other physiotherapists out there? How not necessarily the naming the ingredients, but in terms of your workflows, what's that like? You've already mentioned what it's like to have somebody take off their top and show you their range of motion, for example. So do you have any recommendations of the right way to set up for the teleconsult or what to do during and after?
Yeah, I think my experience is definitely limited with telehealth. I think the biggest take home or the biggest tip that I would give to telehealth is actually it can be quite tricky establishing rapport and maintaining a sense of, I suppose, respect, because there's often lag. There's often, you can't read the facial expressions, and I'm going to link it back to communication skills. And face to face, yes, I primarily focus on face to face communication, but using your webcam communication is a form of communication. So I think whether it's a teleconsult or even a live stream like this or a Zoom meeting, I try to exaggerate my facial expressions a little bit more than I would usually, just because I think there's people can misinterpret you when you're online, and I think it's still important to make the other party to feel welcome and to feel comfortable around you. But in terms of specific physio advice with telehealth, you've got to hand it to Karen Finnan. I think she's the guru in telehealth, and I'm just gonna offer my 1 cent here with telehealth. I've only done a couple of meetings, so I don't want to overspeak here, Yanni.
Well, the longest journey starts with the first step, right? So I think it's kind of that's what I'm expecting most people will go through. They kind of dabble in it, start to build the confidence and get into it, and then some of those more nuanced aspects of delivering telehealth will come into it. But I love your analogy around, the being conscious of your expression through the medium, because, from a communication standpoint, being face-to-face is the best, right? It's like we pick up all those unspoken communication cues that happen. You know, the body language, the posture. There's a certain vibe that happens when we're close to each other. It's just such a rich communication experience. But then we put a monitor in between us and the distance associated with geography. And, you know, video is probably the next best thing if you're going to actually try and do things remotely. There may be some health providers out there doing instant messaging or voice exclusively, and they might beg to differ, and I'd love to talk to them. But video, at least we can see each other. We can see our animation, our expression. So I'd probably encourage people to think about having a little bit more thought in that, and I think that's a great opportunity for the communication experience, because you're actually, you know, if you think about it from the point of view of your lighting, your seating, your backdrop, you know, the type of image that you're projecting through that medium, and then how to actually establish connection, you know, to sort of pass through the technology and really get that engagement with the other person, which really goes a long way towards the rapport, I think, that you're describing there as well. Is that resonating with you? Has that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to build on that, when you're having a physical contact and you're having a physical meeting, there's you have essentially 5 senses, right? You have your sight, you have your smell, you have your hearing, you have a kinesthetic, and you have, I suppose, so sight, hearing. Help me out here, Yanni. Sight, hearing, kinesthetic.
Let's go through it. So sight, smell, taste.
Smell, taste,
we're hearing. So and we're touching.
You're touching, whereas when you're in a video consult or a video meeting, you only have sound and sight, right? You know, you can't smell the other person's scent. You can't taste the environment or the clinic you're in, and you can't shake someone's hand, or you can't actually, you know, feel someone's knee on what it's doing. And I think that really it bundles back, and I like to project it into the future in terms of how will telehealth evolve. And I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well. It's, you know, in the future, would we all be wearing these, I've got them right here. We'll all be wearing these VR headsets, right? You put them on, right? And you actually have, you have water splashing at you, or you have a sense of sound, you have a sense of smell. It will be projecting perfume out of these. And that's how you conduct, and you can actually see the person that you're interacting with there, and you can actually touch them, right? Do you think that's the future of not only healthcare, but the world, right?
I think definitely within the digital health conceptual framework, there's definitely a placeholder for gamification and virtualized and augmented realities. Absolutely. But will it be universal? I don't know. But I definitely think when it comes to, I guess, clinical tools, that seems to be where most of the advances are going at the moment. You know, there's pain management, for example. There's some really cool stuff that's been happening in the digital health space where, you know, the utilization of technology to actually simulate, you know, in burn victims, for example, to actually simulate a healthy arm. Let's say your arm is burnt, to actually help the patient actually see a healthy arm. And as opposed to the burnt arm. And there's the science is developing around the way that the mind perceives that and actually regulates the response to the pain. And so that can actually, that's a really interesting idea in terms of the theories that are developing around that, and how, you know, digital health tools can actually augment the therapy. I've seen in rehabilitation virtualized simulations that where robot arms are attached physically to individuals, and then they walk through a virtual space and perform certain tasks and actions. So there's a lot of great ideas that will come out of that. And I think as technology evolves, we seem to be hitting some optimized limits in terms of what's called in the tech sector Moore's law, which is the acceleration of the improvements in the ability for a silicon chip to actually process more at a more efficient rate. So in other words, smaller but faster. So I think as we kind of have more computing resources, and we sort of break through some of the other fields that we're going into now with quantum computing and breaking away from that kind of binary digital model that we've had in computing up till date, we're going to move into this exponential phase where the tech no longer is necessarily a constraint, but it's more about what do we want to do with it and how quickly can that thing be developed and built. And so AI has a big role to play in that, I think, going forward. I'm personally very excited about these types of opportunities, but however fast we are at the leading edge, at the end of the day, we've still got a whole healthcare industry that needs to come to terms with it. So I don't expect it's going to be a rapid change. I think it's kind of something where the health tech and the culture or the people need to move as one and kind of develop together. And so I think we're going to go at human pace, not necessarily at technology pace.
Machine pace,
Yeah, because we need, it's one thing to say, hey, you can do this amazing stuff with VR or augmented reality or AI, but if practitioners aren't using it, it's the sound of one hand clapping.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's part of the innovation opportunity, I think, for various practitioners and health providers to actually, perhaps do a little bit of R&D and explore the, the fringe of the way we do things now compared to how we possibly could do things. And is that something that happens in the industry? Is there sort of a bit of R&D, not so much in the clinical discoveries, but perhaps in the way that in the modalities and how we actually can deliver healthcare?
Yeah, I think there's a group in America, and I think they're an Israeli-American group that actually does augmented reality for physical therapy rehabilitation. Don't know too much about it, but what I understand is they put on a headset and it helps them complete their rehab exercises from a gamification point of view. I think it's innovative. I think it's progressive, but again, you need people. You need patients to take up on it, and you need clinicians to deliver it. So, and if they're not ready, just like you said, they're not ready. So, we might have this exact same conversation in 15 years and dig this file up, and we can bury it in the time treasure chest.
Well, maybe what will be happening is, you'll be treating me, but I'll have like some kind of robot here that's actually moving its, robotic hands over a particular part of my body while you're on the other side actually doing it, and so we overcome the tyranny of distance there, and actually get things done. That's an interesting concept, actually. That's another subset of the digital health idea. There's a concept called activated carers, and I actually think that's a great opportunity for physio to actually learn how to actually bring family members into the consultation online. So, for example, if you needed me to pinpoint in my back where I'm experiencing pain, rather than me turning around and kind of trying to point to it, I might get, one of my family members to come in and you could say, all right, press here, press there, and then I could actually, so it's almost like you've got a helper. You sort of got this, paraprofessional who's like one of the family members. Is that crazy talk, or is that a possibility?
No. I've seen my fair few of elderly couples, or just couples in general, more so. You get a couple of mums and sons who come in together, and they asking, can I do the same thing that you're doing at home? And I was just like, yep, absolutely. Let me teach you. So I think the power of family members is really crucial, and it can be really helpful. But I think, Yanni, we can't give any unsolicited advice with couples if they end up separating because we've given them physical therapies advice. Because you don't teach anything. You don't teach your loved ones, or you don't treat your loved ones, right? That's my rule.
Look, maybe in some cases it'll improve their relationship because there's the promotion of touch and engagement and connection. All right, now let's talk about in the time we've got left. Let's talk about breaking through, Kennedy, in 2020. So, what's the vision? Why are you doing this? Tell us more.
So Breakthrough conference series started last year. And last year we had a really successful event. So last year was Breakthrough 19, and the theme last year was targeted towards more early career professionals and students, for them to break through into the next phase of career, whether that's from university to a full-time job, or a early career to transition or break through into a mature practitioner. And this year, and I think it's really suiting, and it's really fitting that breakthrough is the theme again this year, because we are in a national and international crisis. And as we've spend the last 35 minutes talking about, that COVID-19 was a huge barrier on our profession in healthcare, whether that's from a treating patients clinical point of view or from a learning point of view. And I think we all, and during this time of crisis, and during this time of struggle for a lot of people in our healthcare system or in our healthcare industry, I think it's really important to keep up the continual professional development in our profession. And that's what inspired me to create Breakthrough 2020. And I suppose the main thing is it is going to be an event run virtually, because it's in the comfort of your own home. We can bring speakers easier. Logistically, it's easier to set up, and there's less cost involved as well. And I think that's where the future of healthcare education, or education in general, is going to go as well. So I think I see this conference as being it is Australia's first sports medicine virtual conference. It has three aims. One is to bring people together. Two is to educate people, and three it's to project what is possible in the future, which is tele-learning or telehealth.
I love it. So, telehealth, tele-anything, I think is one of the subtexts with it.
Yeah.
So I think CPD online. I had a great chat recently with a fellow by the name of Will Egan from Osmed, who has some tools for online CPD broadly in the healthcare sector as well. So I think that's great innovation, Kennedy, and I really commend you on that. So it's you're looking at allied health and sports medicine. So it's a virtual conference, and that's coming up on May the 22nd. Is that right?
Yeah. So Friday, 22nd of May. Looking forward to it. And actually, we're going to have won't ask you too many questions, Yanni, because you're going to be one of the distinguished guests, and I'd like to keep our lips sealed until that day, and until we go through a panel to see what your thoughts are in terms of how this COVID is going to change the landscape of our industry. So yeah, it'll be great having you there as well.
I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for Friday the 22nd to reveal that, and hopefully I will be distinguished on the day.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the CPD side of it. So you're sort of talking about that ongoing professional development. Are there some points available to the attendees? And tell us more about that particular idea. How are people developing themselves with the Breakthrough 2020?
Yeah, so the whole theme of the conference is focused on sports medicine. So whether that's from a physio background, from an exercise physiologist background, or from a podiatry, osteo, chiro, even orthopedic, whether that's medical students or extending from GPs to orthopedic surgeons, there is something for everybody in there. We're going to talk about all the latest research and clinical learning on how to treat, assess, and clinically manage, whether that's from a conservative, non-surgical point of view, as well as a surgical point of view. So we have recognized professionals from all over Australia, and even a speaker from America talking about, so we've got distal lower limb, so foot and ankle, we've got knee, we've got hip, and we've got shoulder. So we're completely covering everything. Again, as I said, a little bit in it for everybody, so that everybody can learn and take some latest research and clinical learning back to their clinical practice, so that when we come out of this, we become stronger and we become better equipped clinicians. that's the goal.
That's great, and you've assembled quite a few clinicians in the process as well. So it's going to be a really interesting format, and hopefully a high degree of engagement there from the people who are participating in it. What are you expecting?
Yeah. I'm expecting. I mean, yeah. When I do a lot of things, I try to have a low expectation. So when it actually comes up really well, and I'm genuinely surprised. So, but in terms of expectations, we currently have 12 speakers lined up, including our panelists. We're expecting about 400 attendees from all over the world. We've had a couple of signups from America, so North America, a couple from the UK, a couple from Ireland, but mainly in Australia. And it will be a live program. It will be recorded as well for viewing and educational purposes for a year after as well. So, and we're really excited, and I think this is going to shape how the future of delivery of learning is going to look like, and yeah, we'll see how it goes, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I think it will. For what it's worth, I think it's key. I think what's happened here is everyone who wasn't doing it beforehand has had a crash course in what it's like to have remote teams, because the concept of the workplace now has extended to people's homes, health practitioners' homes. And with that comes positives and negatives. There are some side effects with isolation. There may be some positives with work-life balance. But I think the idea of continuing to be healthcare practitioners, doesn't matter where we are, and being able to actually access support, access the continuous professional development, being able to deliver healthcare services in person as well as online, it's a really big period of change for us. But I think once we've kind of tasted it and experienced it to some extent, we move forward with it. We don't just sort of get to the other side of COVID-19 and then just sort of say, great, well, we don't have to do that anymore. But it may not be as much, it might be less, but at least it'll be sort of included in some way, and that might open up some new opportunities for online healthcare augmentation with the traditional clinical model. Do you have any thoughts on that? Can you see, one of the questions I like to ask guests on the show is, how do you see life as a physio in 5 years' time? How do you see the reimagination of healthcare, going forward?
Yeah, I think I've thought about the idea you've brought up before, Yanni. It was about we're in a consult here, so I'm the physio, you're the patient, and you get a shirt, or you get a specially designed shirt that actually sticks to your body, and it reacts on my control. Obviously, granting that you give consent and permission. But that shirt can actually instantly diagnose, and it can instantly treat at just the command of my keyboard, whether that's pressing somewhere on the body, or sensing that a particular muscle group is it's atrophied. So in our term, it's not as well developed. And if we can sense, if there's if the shirt can detect my shoulder on my left there's less muscle bulk on the center, on the muscle on my right, and there's pain on my left shoulder, that actually gives me instant feedback in terms of, oh, yep, Yanni's left shoulder is not as strong. That's why he has a painful shoulder. And we'll then go through a couple of tests that I can, there are already technologies out there that measure range of motion through an infrared camera. And then, you look at the quality of your range of motion on the shoulder, and you can prescribe exercise accordingly. And I think it will be a more time efficient, because a lot of things in that process is automated. And it will be a cheaper, from a financial revenue point of view, a cheaper investment as well, just because, again, we're not taking both of our time up as much, and you've got automation to replace that. So I'd like to see the future of physio being a continuation and a progression from telehealth. Whether, from now, what we're doing is we're still asking patients to bend forward. We're still looking at the quality of movement just by eyeballing. But I think with some cooperation or with some injection of some really cool technology of, whether that's infrared camera or whether that's muscle bulk testing, we can really combine those things together and make it a seamless transition into telehealth. That's what I think.
I love it. It's a great vision. You should look into that, mate. I think it's, I don't think there's technical barriers in actually being able to achieve that. I think there's a lot of established technology and science that could be assembled around that to do it in terms of a digital health innovation. That's great. And I like that. I like that vision. It kind of makes a lot of sense. When we look at digital health as an idea, it is about how does the healthcare fit into the lives, the schedules, goals, and aspirations of an individual. And so, in a way, you could kind of see this evolution where the center of healthcare is wherever the patient is or the client, depending on how you refer to them. And the role of the health practitioner in, going forward may be enhanced to actually be like a coach and a mentor or a guide who is working on establishing, the goals of that individual, and then sort of, educating, informing, treating, and providing physical therapy, as well as actually supporting that when the practitioner is not able to physically be there. And when you think about it, that's actually the majority of time, because I'm pretty sure your patients don't spend 24/7 with you. You'd be over servicing, I think. That's probably going to compromise your business model there a little bit. So that means that the majority of the time they're not with you physically. So being able to actually extend digital health, and we're seeing some examples. We've got exercise prescriptions now, with PhysiTrack, Rehab Guru, and the like. And we have a lot of customers that use that in various degrees of engagement, whether they're dabbling or fully have evolved their models around it. But it's one thing to show sort of, video prescriptions or provide support. It's another thing to actually do diagnostic. It's another thing to actually help with empowering the individual to do some of that physical work themselves as well. So I think in a way we may only be limited by our minds around whether those things are achievable or not. So it needs some innovators, Kennedy. So I reckon you should go for it, mate, because that sounds like a really interesting idea, and you could test your hypothesis and put together some proof of concepts and, test and measure and see how it goes.
Only if you be my guinea pig, though. I'll send you that T-shirt. You'll be my first customer.
Look, any T-shirt that's going to be kind of, holding it all in, I'm into that idea. I think that'd be an awesome technology. I think that'd be one of my goals actually achieved in terms of my healthcare. So I'm all in on that one.
Sounds good.
Kennedy, thank you so much for making the time and having a chat with me today and exploring who you are, what you've been doing, the communication experience, the health experience, and moving into the online professional development event for allied and sports medicine.
Sports medicine, yep.
Which is fantastic on May the 22nd. That's great. I'm going to be there. I'm looking forward to it. And I think it's a great innovation. So congratulations to you. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Thanks, Kennedy.
Thank you, Yanni. If it's possible, we can put some of the event details on the show notes.
Absolutely. And, they already are, actually. I mean, that's
perfect.
It's amazing. It's just we're very efficient with all this. But if there's links you want to actually share, just let me know and we'll get that put into the show notes as well.
We'll do, Yanni. Thanks for having me on. We appreciate it.
Terrific. Thank you, Kennedy.